Ripley's, believe it or not, Doc Garfield is the man without a skull. And that's for real. Back in 1919, a guy named Ralph G. Hull was working at a train yard in New Haven, Connecticut, when he accidentally brushed his head against a high tension wire, got electrocuted by 11,000 volts of electricity for 4.5 minutes, and then plummeted down 35 feet to the ground after the power was finally shut off. The damage to Ralph's skull was so severe that the doctors decided to basically just remove all the bone on the top of his head, and that is how regular old Ralph G. Hull became Doc Garfield, the man without a skull. Big time carnival sideshow attraction all throughout the 1920s and 30s. And for good reason too. According to some of the old newspaper articles I found, you could actually see Garfield's exposed brain moving around like beneath a thin layer of skin on the top of his head. So it's no wonder that he could attract an audience. One thing he could not do though, I'm sorry to say, was keep his marriage together. Way back in July of 1924, the man without a skull became the man without a wife. According to his wife's divorce lawyer, Garfield had been secretly keeping a second wife down in South Carolina, like hiding her away from his actual wife, and Garfield responded to those accusations by saying, "Okay, so maybe I have a secret second wife, but listen, every day my wife always refuses to give my unskulled head its daily bath, so I gotta go out and hire these male nurses to come over every day and wash my head, and then my wife starts flirting with the male nurses that are there to wash my head, and also there's this guy named Stout, and my wife is always flirting with Stout, so I asked my wife if she loves Stout, and she said yes, so my wife is flirting with Stout and also the male nurses who are coming over to wash my unskulled head." And unsurprisingly, poor old Doc Garfield did not fare too well in that divorce case. Believe it or not, there is a lake in Webster, Massachusetts called Lake Chargogagog Manchogagog Chabanagungumog. This one is totally true. I actually already made a video about this lake in the past. Hello and welcome to beautiful Lake Chargogog Manchogagog Chabanagungumog. But in that video, I got the pronunciation of the lake wrong, so I had to issue an apology. Today, I want to apologize to you, I want to apologize to the good people of Webster, Massachusetts, and most importantly, I want to apologize to Lake Chargogagog Manchogagog Chabanagungumog. See, as you probably noticed yourself, I was calling the lake Chargogog Manchogagog Chabanagungumog instead of its real name, which is Lake Chargogagog Manchogagog Chabanagungumog. Still trying to live down that blunder. Believe it or not, but the devil is not 100% evil. Because look, only 4 of the 5 letters in the word devil spell evil, so therefore the devil is actually only 80% evil. Believe it or not, icebergs are actually hot. This is some classic 1930s Ripley's nonsense. Like back in the day, Ripley's loved to print just these obviously crazy claims, and then the next day they would run like a super duper weak explanation for why the claim is actually true. Like if we flip this newspaper here ahead a day, then we'll find out that icebergs are actually hot due to the heat glare on the surface of the iceberg. So they're saying that you would be hot if you stood on an iceberg because the sun would be reflecting off the ice and making you hot, which is clearly not at all the same as saying that icebergs are actually hot, not cold. Hey, keep this on the down low, but believe it or not, Paul Griffin can tell by tasting the milk what the cow had for breakfast. This one is true, and that there actually was a guy who claimed that he could do this. Like Paul Griffin was an official milk taster for a creamery in Georgia back during the 1940s, and his job was to take a little sip out of a can of milk, and then he would determine whether that milk should go into the high quality tank or into the skim milk tank. And every day he tasted over 500 cans of milk, and according to him, it was all that practice that made it possible for him to tell what the cow had for breakfast. Like if the cow ate some honeysuckle plants that morning, then its milk would taste a little like wild onion. I'll let you decide if you believe him on that one or not. Believe it or not, do you know when enough is not enough? Rearrange the letters in the word and you get one hug. And as everybody knows, one hug is never enough. So true. Believe it or not, an 8-story tall telephone building in Indianapolis was rotated and moved without interrupting the telephone service. This one is completely true and absolutely spectacular. Like, check this out. The January 1931 edition of the Bell Telephone Quarterly has like a whole bunch of sequential pictures of the building being pivoted. And if we kind of put all these together, then we get like a nice little video showing how the building was moved. Like, pretty wild, right? Like, they did this basically by just like jacking up the building and then very slowly over the course of a month rotating the entire thing. The craziest part of the story though is that the building was still open and in active use the entire time that it was being pivoted. Like, gas, water, sewer were all still operational the whole way through. And all the employees who worked in the building were still coming and going as usual too. Like, people would just come to work and then walk through this little like tunnel thing that they built there and then leave at the end of the day with the building rotated an extra 10 feet over from when they first walked inside that morning. It's pretty nuts. Believe it or not, these two bars are the same length.
All right, so we got the bars right here. Let's go ahead and grab this one and we'll just put it on top. Let's make it half transparent and we'll just drag it up there. I don't know. I'm not so sure about that one, Ripley's.
Believe it or not, Cyclops, the automaton with one great electric eye. The instant that Cy sees a fire, he shoots a stream of carbon dioxide out of his cigar and quenches the blaze. This is just one of many attractions that the Westinghouse Electric Circus used to advertise back in the 1930s. Like, come to their traveling show and you're gonna get to see Barney Ogle, the Eye Driver, and the House Laugh, and the escape of Tough Trigger Tony, and of course, the one-eyed electric fireman, aka Cyrus H. Klops, Cyclops for short. As you might expect from the name, the Electric Circus was like a whole series of electrical powered contraptions doing a whole bunch of amazing things to wow the audience, such as an electric eye that can sort colors, or another electric eye that can spot criminals trying to escape a prison, or some floating steel, or a Cyclops robot detecting fire and then shooting out carbon dioxide to extinguish the fire. Unfortunately, I could not find like any reviews of the circus or like accounts from people who actually saw it or like anything like that, so I'm not really sure how well Cyrus H. Klops actually worked, but one thing I can tell you is that Ripley's really kind of dressed up the Cyclops a bit with their drawing here. Like, they made him look real sharp in this drawing, but in real life, he looked a little bit more like that. Believe it or not, this is the gravestone of Joseph Palmer, who was persecuted for wearing the beard. That's true, I've been there, I made a video about that. Believe it or not, this is the gravestone of a country dance prompter and band leader that has a violin inscribed onto it. That's true, I made a video about that too. Believe it or not, this is Boot Hill Cemetery in Billings, Montana. It's called that because everybody buried there died with their boots on. That's kind of true. I have been there and I did make a video about that. You know, the boots thing is more like a pithy little way to communicate that most of the people there died unexpected deaths rather than like a universal fact about the cemetery. So this is like a kind of a half-truth. Believe it or not, Uncle Jim Webster held a silver dollar in his mouth for 67 years for good luck. This one is, again, completely true, as long as you trust the guy himself. Like, reportedly, in the year 1930, Jim Webster was an 84-year-old man who had been carrying a silver dollar around in his mouth ever since he was a teenager. Like, for decades, he basically never took the dollar out. He slept with it in his mouth, and he even ate with it in his mouth. He would just like push it to the side so that he could still chew. In fact, the only time that silver dollar ever came out was once every 10 years when he would take it out and swap it for a brand new silver dollar. Because I guess a decade is just about the comfortable lifespan of a heavily salivated silver dollar. Oh, and just once, Jim actually tried to use a $half instead of a full-size silver dollar, and that didn't work out too well because that particular coin was just a little bit too small to keep track of in his mouth, and he ended up accidentally swallowing it. But you know, all that effort seemed to be well worth it because Jim had not been sick a single time since he first put that coin in his mouth 67 years ago. He's been healthy as a horse ever since he first tasted that silver. Believe it or not, it is impossible to break a glass on the floor with a barrel. Well, I'll be damned.